Hey guys, tonight you're not reading about Almanzo Wilder, the handsome farmer boy who saved Laura Ingalls' heart with gentle Morgan horses and steady hands. You're not hearing about the romantic hero who rode through blizzards to rescue a starving town. You're not stepping into the warm glow of a children's book where hard work always wins and good people always succeed. You're standing on a wind-scraped prairie in Dakota Territory on August 21st, 1879. The grass stretches to the horizon in every direction. The air tastes like dust and distance, and you're watching a 32-year-old man stake a claim that will destroy him. His name is Royal Gould Wilder. He is Almanzo's older brother. He arrived here first. He brought the money, he chose the land, and in 14 years, he will walk away from this place with nothing but debts and a name that history will erase. You need to understand something before we go further. This is not a story about failure. This is a story about inevitability. 80% of frontier businesses collapsed within 5 years. Royal was not unlucky. He was statistically predictable. But his younger brother married a woman who would write books that millions of children would read, and in those books Royal becomes a shadow, a background character, a man mentioned briefly and then forgotten. While Almanzo becomes immortal, Royal becomes invisible. Royal stands on the claim he has chosen. Section 21. Township 111 North, Range 56 West. The location is perfect, half a mile from where the town of DeSmet will be platted. Right next to the railroad line that is pushing west. This is the most valuable commercial location in the entire county, and Royal claimed it before anyone else understood what it would become. He's a big man, broader than Almanzo. His hands are thick from years of farm work in New York and Minnesota. His face is weathered in a way that makes him look older than 32. He does not smile easily. He has travelled 800 miles to stand on this empty grassland because Minnesota farming is failing and Dakota Territory promises something better. Fresh land, no competition, a railroad that will connect Prairie wheat to Chicago markets, a chance to build something that matters. Royal has capital, not wealth but capital. He sold property in Minnesota. He saved money working for his father. He has perhaps $800, maybe $1,000. In 1879, that is serious money. Enough to buy lumber for a real building. Enough to stock a store with merchandise. Enough to survive the first winter when income is uncertain and expenses are constant. He looks at the prairie and sees a feed store. Farmers need grain for livestock. They need seed wheat for planting. They need hay and oats and supplies. The homesteaders flooding into Dakota Territory are desperate for these things, and Royal will sell them. He'll become the merchant that new settlers depend on. He will build a business that feeds a town, and he will prosper. That is what he believes in August 1879. The belief feels reasonable. The Dakota Boom is exploding. The population of the territory is doubling every few years. Towns appear overnight where survey stakes are driven into empty ground. The Chicago and Northwestern Railway reached this area in February. Suddenly, land that was worthless becomes valuable. Homesteaders pour in on every train. They file claims, build shanties, break sod. They need supplies. Someone has to sell those supplies. Why not Royal Wilder? He drives the stakes that mark his claim boundaries. The wooden posts sink into earth that is harder than he expected. The prairie sod is dense. Grass roots weave together like iron cables. Breaking this land will require heavy ploughs and strong horses. But that is a problem for farmers. Royal is not here to farm. He is here to supply the farmers. Let them break the sod and plant the wheat and pray for rain. He will sell them what they need and take his profit regardless of whether their crops succeed or fail. This is smart thinking. Merchants are safer than farmers. Farmers depend on weather, prices and luck. Merchants depend on customers, and customers are arriving by the thousands. Royal is positioning himself at the centre of an economic boom. He is early. He is capitalised. He is strategic. He is also doomed. Royal does not know about the long winter that will bury this town under 30 feet of snow in 18 months. He does not know that the railroad he is depending on will stop running for 7 months straight. He does not know that wheat prices will collapse from $1 per bushel to 40 cents in less than a decade. He does not know that grasshoppers will return in clouds that darken the sky. He does not know that drought will turn this prairie into cracked earth where nothing grows. He does not know that the Panic of 1893 will destroy credit systems across the entire nation. He does not know that his younger brother will marry a girl named Laura Ingalls, who will write books that make Almanzo a hero and Royal a footnote. He hammers the stakes into the ground. The sound echoes across empty land. He's claiming 160 acres of prairie that belong to the Lakota Sioux, until the United States Army seized it 2 years ago. He's not thinking about that. Nobody thinks about that. The land is open for settlement. The government is giving it away. You file your paperwork, pay your $18, and the land is yours if you can survive 5 years. Royal can survive 5 years. He is tough. He is experienced. He is older and smarter than most of the young men stumbling off the trains with nothing but hope and ignorance. But the prairie does not care about experience. The economy does not care about capital, and history does not remember the men who arrived first if their brothers married the right women. August 1879 turns into September. Royal rides into the cluster of buildings that will become DeSmet. The town does not exist yet, not officially. What exists is a railroad depot, 3 temporary shacks serving as saloons, a land office and a surveyor's tent. The railroad workers drink at night and lay track during the day. Speculators arrive with maps and claim they represent investors from Chicago. Land office clerks process homestead applications from dawn until dark. Everyone smells money. DeSmet will be platted in November. That is 3 months away, but Royal does not wait for official town designation. He buys a business lot on what will become Main Street, Block 1, Lot 3. The price is steep, $75 for a plot of dirt. But the location is everything, right next to the railroad depot, right where farmers will unload their wheat and load their supplies. The first merchant to build on Main Street will have the advantage. Royal intends to be first. He orders lumber from a supplier in Minnesota. The cost makes him wince. Boards that would cost $2 in Minnesota cost $6 delivered to Dakota Territory. Everything is expensive on the frontier because everything must be shipped by rail, and railroads charge whatever they want. Royal calculates the numbers. A building 20 feet by 30 feet will cost approximately $300 in materials. Add another $100 for labor if he hires help. $400 total. Half his capital. He builds it himself. Royal and Almanzo work together. Almanzo arrived in Dakota several weeks after Royal, filed his own homestead claim, and immediately started helping his older brother. This is how families survive. You work together, you share labor. If Royal succeeds, Almanzo benefits. If Almanzo's wheat farm prospers, Royal has a customer. The building goes up slowly. They frame walls, nail boards, tar the roof. The structure is simple. 1 large room for merchandise storage and sales, a small back room for Royal's living quarters, a counter made from rough pine, shelves built against the walls. A stove for heat because Dakota winters are brutal and customers will not shop in a freezing store. By October the building is finished. Royal Wilder Feed and Seed opens for business. The sign painted above the door is plain. No fancy lettering, just the name and the service. Royal is not selling charm. He is selling bulk grain and survival supplies. His first inventory arrives by rail. 50 bushels of seed wheat purchased from a wholesaler in Minneapolis. 20 bushels of oats, bales of hay stacked in the back, bags of cornmeal, salt pork, kerosene, nails, wire, axes, every item a homesteader might need. Royal arranges the merchandise carefully. He prices everything at a markup that feels fair but profitable. 10% above wholesale on grain, 15% on tools, 20% on luxury items like coffee and sugar. The first customers arrive within days. Men who filed homestead claims and need seed for fall planting. Women who need kerosene because winter darkness is coming and candles are expensive. Children sent by their parents to buy cornmeal or salt. Royal learns their names. He extends credit to families he trusts. He writes their purchases in a ledger book with careful handwriting. Payment due after harvest. This is how frontier commerce works. Cash is scarce. Credit is essential. You trust your neighbours because you have no choice. Royal makes his first sales. 5 bushels of seed wheat to a Norwegian farmer named Olsen. $2.50 per bushel. Olsen does not have cash. He signs a note promising payment in November after he harvests his crop. Royal files the note in a wooden box under the counter. By the end of October, the box contains 43 notes representing $212 in unpaid credit. This seems reasonable. Harvest is coming. Farmers will sell their wheat to grain buyers. They will have cash. They will pay their debts. Royal will recover his capital and reinvest in spring inventory. The system works as long as the harvest succeeds, but success depends on weather, and the weather in Dakota Territory is never predictable. Royal watches snow begin to fall in mid-October. This is earlier than normal. Most years snow does not arrive until November, but October 1880 brings a blizzard that drops 6 inches overnight. The temperature plunges to 20 degrees. The wind blows so hard that Royal's building shakes. He lights the stove and burns hay because coal has not arrived on the latest supply train. The farmers who owe him money are harvesting in desperate haste. The wheat is not fully ripe. Some fields are only half cut, but another storm is coming, and grain left standing in the field will be buried and lost. The wheat they managed to cut is loaded onto wagons and hauled to town. The grain elevator operator pays 60 cents per bushel, lower than expected. The farmers calculate their income and realise it barely covers their expenses. Royal starts to understand a problem he did not anticipate. If farmers make no profit, they cannot pay debts. If they cannot pay debts, he does not recover his capital. If he does not recover capital, he cannot buy spring inventory. The system requires every step to succeed. If one step fails, the entire chain breaks. November arrives. Farmers come to Royal's store to settle accounts. Most of them pay something, half of what they owe, a quarter. One farmer pays in wheat instead of cash. Royal accepts the wheat because refusing means losing the entire debt. He now owns 40 bushels of wheat that he must store or sell. The grain elevator operator offers him 50 cents per bushel. Royal paid 62 cents per bushel wholesale. He is losing money on inventory that he accepted as debt payment. This is the trap. He cannot refuse credit because refusing means no customers. He cannot collect debts because farmers have no cash. He cannot sell inventory at a loss because that destroys his capital. But he cannot hold inventory indefinitely because storage costs money and wheat deteriorates. The business is only 2 months old, and the margins are already narrower than Royal planned. Then the long winter arrives. October 15th, 1880. The blizzard starts without warning. One moment the sky is grey and cold. The next moment the wind is screaming and snow is falling so thick that you cannot see 10 feet. The temperature drops to 0, then keeps falling. 15 below, 20 below. Colder. Royal is in his store when the storm hits. 3 customers are inside. They look at each other and understand immediately that they cannot leave. The storm will kill anyone who tries to walk even 100 yards. You can freeze to death between buildings in weather like this, so they stay. Royal lights the stove and feeds it hay. The 4 of them sit near the heat and wait. The storm lasts 3 days. 3 days of continuous wind and snow and cold that makes your bones ache. The building holds. The roof does not collapse. The walls do not blow down, but the merchandise is trapped. No one can reach the store. No one can buy supplies. Royal's business is frozen in place. When the storm finally ends, Royal steps outside and sees a town transformed. Snow has drifted to the roof lines. The street is buried under 6-foot drifts. The railroad tracks are completely invisible. And in the distance, he can see men shoveling frantically, trying to clear a path to the depot. The train does not come. This is unusual. The railroad runs daily. Supplies arrive every afternoon. But the storm blocked the tracks somewhere east of DeSmet. The railroad crews are working to clear the line, but it will take days, maybe a week. Royal is not worried yet. He has inventory. The town has supplies. A week is manageable. But the train does not come in a week. It does not come in 2 weeks. By early November, Royal realizes that something is seriously wrong. The railroad is blocked somewhere between DeSmet and Tracy, Minnesota. Snowdrifts are too deep for locomotives to push through. Crews are working, but every time they clear a section, another storm refills it with snow. DeSmet is isolated. Royal's inventory begins to deplete. Customers buy kerosene because darkness is constant now, and lamps must burn all evening. They buy cornmeal because flour is running low. They buy hay because livestock are starving. Royal sells what he has, but he cannot resupply. The goods on his shelves are finite, and every sale brings him closer to empty. By December he is rationing. He limits kerosene purchases to 1 gallon per family. He reserves seed wheat for spring planting and refuses to sell it for food. He watches his inventory shrink day by day while the railroad remains blocked and the storms keep coming. The long winter has begun. This winter will last 7 months. The railroad will not run again until May, and Royal Wilder, the man who planned so carefully, who arrived first, who built the best building on Main Street, will watch his business suffocate under snow and cold and isolation. His ledger book sits on the counter. The notes customers signed promising payment after harvest are filed in the box. But the harvest money is gone. Families spent their wheat profits on survival. They have nothing left to pay debts. Royal cannot collect what people do not have. He stands in his store on a December evening. The shelves are half empty. The stove burns hay that he's running out of. The temperature outside is 30 below zero. His younger brother Almanzo is somewhere out on the prairie, surviving in a claim shanty. The town is trapped. The railroad is gone, and the feed store that was supposed to make Royal prosperous is slowly dying. He does not know it yet, but this winter is the beginning of the end. Not the end of his business. That will take another decade of grinding attrition. But the end of the dream. The end of the belief that hard work and good planning guarantee success. The end of the idea that arriving first means winning. Royal Wilder arrived first. He built first. He opened first. And he will lose everything anyway, because the prairie does not reward planning. It rewards luck. And Royal's luck runs out in October 1880, when the first blizzard buries his merchandise under snow that will not melt for 7 months. The storm outside howls, the stove burns low, and Royal calculates numbers that do not add up to survival. January 1881. You are Royal Wilder, and you are learning what desperation tastes like. It tastes like flour stretched with ground wheat. It tastes like coffee made from burned grain because real coffee ran out in December. It tastes like hunger that gnaws your stomach at night while the wind screams outside and the temperature drops to 40 below zero. The town of DeSmet is dying. Not quickly, slowly. The way a fire dies when you run out of fuel. The way hope dies when every morning brings another blizzard and every evening brings the realization that the railroad is not coming today. Not tomorrow, not this week, maybe not ever. Your store is nearly empty. The shelves that were stocked with merchandise in October now hold nothing but dust and a few items nobody wants. 3 bags of cornmeal that are mostly gone, half a barrel of salt pork that is frozen solid and must be chipped apart with an axe, 2 coils of wire, a box of nails. That is your entire inventory. Everything else has been sold or given away or consumed during the 3 months since the storms began. You stand behind the counter and stare at the ledger book. The pages are filled with names and debts. Olson owes you $12. Peterson owes $8. The Ingalls family owes $6.40 for kerosene and cornmeal purchased in November. Every family in town owes you something. The total is $473. You will never collect it. You know this now. The money is gone. The harvest profits were spent on survival. Families have nothing left except the clothes they wear and the buildings they huddle in. Some of them are burning furniture to stay warm. Some are twisting prairie hay into tight bundles and burning that. The Ingalls family burns hay all winter because Charles cannot afford coal, and the coal supply ran out anyway when the railroad stopped. You cannot ask starving people to pay debts. You cannot knock on doors and demand money from families who are eating bread made from seed wheat that should have been saved for spring planting. You cannot be that man. So the debts sit in the ledger book, written in careful handwriting representing capital that no longer exists. The blizzards come every few days, sometimes every day. You stop counting after the 20th storm. Each one follows the same pattern. The wind rises, the temperature drops. The snow falls thick and hard, driven horizontal by wind that sounds like wolves howling. The drifts pile higher. Main Street is buried. The buildings are half covered. You shovel a path to your door every morning, and by afternoon the path is filled again. The railroad tracks are somewhere under 30 feet of snow. You cannot see them anymore. The depot is buried to the roofline. Men tried to dig it out in December, but the effort was hopeless. Every shovelful of snow they removed was replaced by 10 more from the next storm. They gave up. The depot is a snow-covered mound now, a grave marker for the transportation system that was supposed to connect this prairie to the rest of America. Your brother Almanzo is living in his claim shanty 3 miles southeast of town. You have not seen him since December. The distance is too dangerous to travel during storms. 3 miles might as well be 300 when visibility is 0 and the cold can kill you in minutes. You assume he is alive. You hope he is alive, but you do not know. Other families moved into town for the winter. Charles Ingalls brought his family into DeSmet in November, abandoning their claim shanty because surviving in an isolated building was too risky. They rent a small building on Main Street. Charles does carpentry work when anyone needs it, which is almost never because no one is building anything in this weather. His wife Caroline sews, his daughters help. They survive the way everyone survives. Barely. You ration your own food, 1 meal a day. Sometimes 2 if you are lucky. Your body is losing weight. Your clothes hang loose. Your hands shake slightly when you try to write in the ledger. This is not starvation. Not yet. But it is the edge of starvation. The place where your body starts consuming itself because there is not enough food to maintain what you were. The worst part is not the hunger. The worst part is the helplessness. You are a merchant. Your job is selling supplies. But you have no supplies to sell. You're a businessman. Your job is making profit. But there is no profit when your inventory is gone and your customers have no money. You're trapped in a building on a buried street in a town that might not survive until spring, and you begin to understand something that will take years to fully accept. You made no mistakes. You planned well. You chose the right location. You stocked the right merchandise. You extended reasonable credit. Everything you did was correct according to the rules of frontier commerce, but the rules do not matter when the weather decides to kill you. February 1881. The town is out of wheat. Not low on wheat, out of wheat. The last family with a private supply ran out 3 days ago. There is no bread, no flour, no grain of any kind. People are eating potatoes that have frozen and thawed so many times they taste like wet dirt. They are eating salt pork that is mostly salt. They are drinking coffee made from burned wheat that no longer exists. Starvation is no longer theoretical. It is days away. You're in your store when the rumour starts. Someone heard that a farmer 12 miles south of town has wheat. Not much. Maybe 20 or 30 bushels, but he has wheat, and he might sell it if someone can reach him and make an offer. 12 miles south in February during the long winter is a death sentence. The storms are constant. The temperature has not risen above 0 in 6 weeks. The snow is hip deep in the places where it has not drifted to chest height. No horse can travel through that. No wagon can move. Anyone attempting the journey will freeze or get lost or both. But starvation is certain. Freezing is only probable. The town needs that wheat. Your brother Almanzo volunteers. He's 23 years old. He knows horses. He knows cold. He has been surviving alone in a claim shanty for 4 months, which means he is either very tough or very lucky or both. Cap Garland volunteers with him. Cap is young, maybe 19, reckless in the way young men are when they have not yet learned that boldness and death are close neighbours on the prairie. They leave on a morning when the wind is calm and the temperature is only 15 below 0. This counts as good weather in February 1881. They ride 2 horses. They carry empty sacks for the wheat. They promise to return by nightfall. You watch them disappear into the white landscape. The snow stretches in every direction, broken only by the shapes of buried buildings and fence posts. The horizon is invisible. Sky and ground blend into a single pale emptiness. You think about the farmer 12 miles south. You think about whether the rumour is even true. You think about your brother freezing in a drift somewhere between here and there. You wait. The entire town waits. Families stand in doorways and watch the southern horizon. Children ask their mothers when the wheat is coming. The mothers do not answer because they do not know if the wheat is coming at all. Hours pass. The sun moves across the sky, pale and cold behind thin clouds. The temperature drops as afternoon turns to evening. Still no sign of Almanzo and Cap. You begin to calculate. 12 miles south, 12 miles back, 24 miles total. In deep snow, moving slowly, stopping to rest the horses. 6 hours minimum, maybe 8. They left at dawn. It is now mid-afternoon. They should return soon, but soon becomes evening, evening becomes dusk, and still the southern horizon is empty. You stand outside your store in the cold. Your breath freezes in your beard. Your feet are numb inside your boots. Other men stand with you. No one speaks. There is nothing to say. Either the boys return with wheat, or they do not return at all. Then someone shouts. 2 shapes appear on the horizon. Horses moving slowly through the snow. Riders slumped in the saddles. Sacks tied behind them. They made it. Almanzo and Cap ride into town half frozen. Their faces are white with frostbite. Their hands can barely hold the reins. The horses are exhausted, their sides heaving, frost coating their manes. But the sacks hold wheat. 60 pounds of wheat purchased from a farmer named Anderson, who charged $1.25 per bushel. Highway robbery at triple the normal price. But Almanzo paid it because the alternative was watching the town starve. The wheat is divided. Every family receives a portion based on size. The Ingalls family gets 8 pounds. Your share is 10 pounds because you live alone and the calculation is brutally fair. 10 pounds of wheat is perhaps 3 weeks of bread if you stretch it. 3 weeks is not salvation, but it is time. Time for another storm to pass. Time for the railroad to maybe break through. Time to not die today. You grind the wheat in a coffee mill because the town's grain mill is buried and inoperable. The hand cranking takes an hour. Your arm aches. The flour that emerges is coarse and brown and mixed with bits of chaff. You mix it with water and a pinch of salt. You fry the dough in a pan with a tiny amount of lard. The bread that results is dense and hard and tastes like survival. It is the best thing you have eaten in weeks. Almanzo becomes a hero that day. The town remembers. The story spreads. Years later, when Laura Ingalls Wilder writes her books, she will tell this story in careful detail. The brave young men who risked death to save the town. The wheat that arrived just in time. The frontier spirit triumphing over impossible odds. Your role in the story is minimal. You're mentioned as a background character. The older brother. The one who stayed in town. Not the hero, just a witness. This is how legends are made. Not through planning or capital or arriving first. Through dramatic action at the right moment with the right storyteller to preserve it. Almanzo saved the town. You merely survived it, and history rewards salvation more than survival. May 1881. The railroad finally breaks through. The locomotive arrives on May 10th, pulling freight cars loaded with supplies that should have arrived in November. The town gathers at the depot to watch the train pull in. Some people cry, some people cheer. Some people just stand silently and stare because they're too exhausted to feel anything except relief that the ordeal is over. You do not cheer, you calculate. The train brings flour, coal, cornmeal, coffee, sugar, kerosene, lumber, hardware, everything the town needed for 7 months. The prices are catastrophic. Flour is $12 per barrel, triple the normal rate. Coal is $18 per ton. Kerosene is 40 cents per gallon. The suppliers know they have a captive market. They know the town is desperate. They charge accordingly. You need to restock your store. Your shelves are empty. Your customers need supplies. But restocking requires capital, and your capital is gone. The $473 in unpaid debt sitting in your ledger book is not actual money. It is a list of promises from people who have nothing to give. You visit the bank. DeSmet has one bank, opened in 1880 by a man from Iowa who saw opportunity in a boom town. You explain your situation. You need a loan, $500 to restock inventory. You will repay it after the harvest when customers settle their accounts. The banker listens. He asks questions. He reviews your ledger. He sees the long list of unpaid debts. He sees that you extended credit to families who could not pay. He sees that you are a merchant without merchandise asking for money to buy goods that you will sell on credit to people who already owe you money they cannot repay. He denies the loan, you argue. You explain that the winter was exceptional, that the railroad failure was beyond anyone's control, that your customers are honest people who will pay their debts after harvest, that your business was profitable before the storms and will be profitable again if you can just restock. The banker is unmoved. Risk is risk. Your balance sheet shows loss. Your assets are depleted. Your receivables are uncollectible. The bank will not lend to a merchant with no inventory and no capital. You leave the bank with nothing except the understanding that you are trapped. You cannot restock without money. You cannot earn money without inventory. You cannot collect old debts because your customers have nothing. The winter destroyed your business not through single catastrophe but through erosion. Every week of isolation stripped away a layer of capital until nothing remained except debt and empty shelves. Other merchants face the same problem. Some close immediately. Some limp along trying to rebuild with whatever credit their suppliers will extend. Some leave town entirely, abandoning their buildings and their dreams and heading back east or further west to try again somewhere else. You do not leave, not yet. You have family here. Almanzo is establishing his farm. Eliza Jane, your sister, has arrived to teach school. The Wilder family is invested in DeSmet. Leaving means admitting defeat. It means losing not just money, but pride. It means watching your younger brother succeed while you fail. So you stay. You scrape together what money you have left. Maybe $100, maybe less. You buy minimal inventory. 2 barrels of flour, 1 barrel of cornmeal, some kerosene, some nails. Enough to keep the store technically open. Enough to tell yourself that you're still a merchant, but the margins are gone. The profit that should have accumulated during winter vanished into survival. The capital that should have been reinvested into spring inventory was consumed by 7 months of isolation. You're starting over, but starting over with less than you had in 1879 because now you also carry debt and damaged credit, and a reputation as the merchant who could not keep supplies in stock during the crisis. The town moves forward. Farmers plant their wheat. The weather is good. The crops grow tall and green. Harvest in August is strong. Wheat prices are decent. Families earn money. Some of them pay their debts. Not all, not even most. But some. You collect maybe $180 from the $473 owed. That is a recovery rate of 38%. The rest is written off. Gone. You draw a line through the names in your ledger. Olson never pays. Peterson pays $3 of the 8 he owes. The Ingalls family pays nothing because Charles had his own expenses and his own setbacks. This is frontier economics. You extend credit because you must. You lose money because customers cannot pay. You absorb the loss because demanding payment from starving families makes you a villain, and villains do not survive in small towns where reputation is currency. By December 1881, your store is still open, but the dream is dead. The plan to become the prosperous merchant serving a boom town has been replaced by the reality of being a struggling shopkeeper in a town that barely survived. You work longer hours for smaller profits. You watch customers more carefully before extending credit. You calculate every expense because there is no margin for error, and you watch your younger brother Almanzo court Laura Ingalls. You watch them ride together in his buggy. You watch him build a house on his claim. You watch him prepare for marriage and family and a future that looks brighter than yours. Almanzo lost everything in the long winter too. His wheat crop failed. His claim shanty nearly killed him. But he is younger. He is unmarried. He has fewer responsibilities and more time to recover. And he has something you do not have. He has a story of heroism. The wheat-buying expedition, the ride through the blizzard, the salvation of the town. You stayed in your store and rationed supplies and extended credit and slowly went broke. That story does not inspire books. It does not create legends. It just creates debt. The long winter broke Royal Wilder. Not instantly, not obviously, but completely. And the fractures will widen over the next decade until there is nothing left except a man leaving town with empty pockets and a name that history forgets. The first summer after the long winter looks almost kind. The snow melts slowly, turning Main Street into a river of mud. The railroad runs every day now, as if it had not abandoned you for 7 months. Grain buyers arrive with their scales and their ledgers. New settlers come off the trains, their eyes bright with the same dangerous hope that carried you here 2 years ago. From the outside, it looks as if DeSmet has survived and moved on. Inside your store, you know better. You open your doors every morning. You sweep the floor, restock the few goods you can afford, and wait for customers. You sell flour, kerosene, nails, seed wheat, and small luxuries like coffee and sugar to people who have not tasted sweetness in months. They smile when they buy sugar. They linger over coffee beans, inhaling the smell as if it were a promise that life will not always be cold and grey. They pay in cash more often now. Coins and crumpled bills appear on your counter. Harvest was good this year. The wheat grew tall. The prices for once are not miserable. You should feel relief. You should feel that you have turned a corner. Instead, you feel the weight of the ledger book. You keep it under the counter. It is heavier than it looks, not because of the paper, but because every page carries the ghost of last winter. Names, amounts, debts that were never paid. You open it at night when the store is empty, running your finger down lines that are already going faint from being traced so many times. You cross out what little has been repaid. $1 here, 50 cents there. The numbers shrink, but not enough. Even after a good harvest, most families can only spare a fraction of what they owe. They have their own needs to meet: seed for next year, clothes for children who outgrew them during the winter, repairs on shanties that barely survived the storms. You do not blame them. You cannot. You were there. You remember what it was like to choose between fuel and food, between coal and flour, between paying a debt and keeping a child warm. But your supplier in Minnesota was not there. He does not remember your blizzards because he never lived them. His letters arrive every month, neat and polite at first. "Dear Mr. Wilder, we trust this letter finds you well. Our records show an outstanding balance." The numbers in those letters do not care about muskrat houses built high before winter, or 7 months without trains, or a town grinding wheat in coffee mills. They only care about what you owe. You write back, you explain. You describe the winter, the blocked railroad, the empty shelves. You promise that you will pay, that business is improving, that the harvest was good, that you're collecting what you can. The replies grow colder. Further extension of credit will depend upon prompt reduction of your balance. That is the phrase that matters. Without their credit, you cannot buy inventory. Without inventory, you do not have a store. You have a building with shelves that remember what they once held. So you make decisions. You stop extending credit to most customers. You tell yourself you are being prudent, but it feels like betrayal. A man who survived the winter beside you, who burned twisted hay and ate bread made from coffee mill flour, now stands at your counter with empty hands and you say, "I'm sorry, cash only." He looks at you as if you have broken something sacred, because you have. The unspoken rule that everyone will carry everyone else through disaster has been replaced with the cold arithmetic of survival. Some people accept it. They nod and walk away. Some argue, some beg. A few never come back. When they leave, you stare at the door and wonder whether you just lost a customer or preserved your last chance of staying open. The answer shifts day by day like light on prairie grass. One hot afternoon, a train arrives carrying another wave of settlers. You step outside and watch them climb down. A man in his 20s with a new hat and a stiff collar. A woman holding a baby wrapped in a quilt. 2 boys with eyes that dart from building to building, measuring the size of their new world. You know exactly what they have been told. Rich soil, free land, a climate that rewards hard work. They do not know about grasshoppers yet. They do not know about drought. They certainly do not know about wheat prices in Liverpool and Chicago. You watch them, and for the first time since arriving in Dakota, you do not feel like a pioneer. You feel like a warning they cannot read. In the evening, you walk out of town to your claim and stand on the land you barely see anymore. You had dreams once. More acres, more buildings, maybe even a larger brick store with multiple rooms and a sign people would see from the train. Those dreams are quieter now. You listen instead. To the wind sliding through the grass, to the faint whistle of a train far away, to the sound of numbers rearranging themselves in your head, no matter how hard you try not to think about them. The prairie looks endless. Your options do not. The year after the good harvest is not kind. The rain comes late, then it stops coming at all. At first, it feels like a normal dry spell. The sky stays clear. The sun burns a little hotter. The soil under your boots feels a little more like powder and a little less like earth. The farmers come into your store and buy as usual. Seed, tools, a little sugar if they feel hopeful. Then the weeks lengthen. Clouds pass without breaking. The grass in the unfenced land turns from green to brittle yellow. You listen to your farmer customers. You always have. Their worries become your worries, because their crops are your future receipts. They talk about cracked soil, curling leaves, shallow roots searching for water that is not there. They talk quietly so their children do not hear. One evening a man sets a small sack of wheat on your counter. "I was going to keep this for seed," he says, "but I need flour now. If the rain doesn't come, there will be nothing to plant anyway." You weigh the sack. You offer him less than it is worth, because you cannot afford to be generous and you hate yourself for that. He accepts the price without arguing. Hunger takes the strength out of pride. By midsummer, the drought has a shape. It is no longer a question. It is a fact. The wheat fields around DeSmet stand in stiff rows of stunted stalks. Heads that should be full and heavy are thin and light. The grain inside rattles when you rub it between your fingers as if it is already dead. The grasshoppers come next. They arrive on a hot day when the air feels like the inside of an oven. At first, you think the distant haze on the horizon is dust. Then the haze moves against the wind. It drifts closer, and you hear it before you see it clearly, a soft, relentless clicking like millions of tiny teeth. They land in waves. They strip gardens first, then fields. They eat leaves, tender shoots, even fence posts and tool handles when they are hungry enough. They do not care that this is your second disaster in 2 years. They do not care about the calculations in your ledger book, or the letters from your supplier, or the memory of wheat ground in coffee mills. They eat and move on and leave behind a silence that is somehow louder than their arrival. You stand with the farmers at the edge of a ruined field, the soil beneath your boots bare and chewed. No one speaks. There are no words big enough for this kind of loss. A man who owed you money last year wipes his face with his sleeve. "Well," he says finally, his voice flat, "I suppose we will be paying you in grasshopper wings this fall. It is a joke, but not really. You laugh anyway, because the only other option is to start screaming and never stop." Wheat prices fall even as crops fail. You hear about it through the grain buyers. They talk freely because your store is their meeting place as much as it is the farmers. You listen while pretending to sweep. Good harvests in other states. Strong yields overseas. Markets flooded with grain. Prices dropping. Too much wheat where it survived. Not enough where it died. The cruel arithmetic of a world tied together by railroads and ships you will never see. Farmers around DeSmet face the worst of both worlds. Damaged crops and miserable prices for whatever they manage to haul into town. When they sell, they bring you their coins carefully. They pay a bit of what they owe. They buy only what they cannot live without. You watch your own margins shrink. The cost of bringing goods in by rail does not fall with wheat prices. The railroad still charges what it always charged, sometimes more. The grain buyers still dock farmers for anything less than perfect. Everyone along the chain takes a cut. You are part of that chain. You are also caught in it. One day, another letter arrives from Minnesota. The script is sharper, the sentence is shorter. Unless your balance is reduced by half within 60 days, we will be unable to continue shipment on credit. Future orders will require full payment in advance. You read that sentence twice, then a third time. Full payment in advance. For you, in DeSmet, that might as well be written in another language. You could close the store, you think, just shut the doors, sell the building, walk away before the noose tightens further. Men have done it. You've watched them vanish. Their businesses boarded up behind them like mouths that tried to speak against the wind and failed. But leaving means going where? East, back to Minnesota, where land is more expensive and opportunities smaller. South, to some other town repeating the same story with a different name. West, further into a country that chews through men and spits out their bones into unmarked graves. You go to Almanzo's claim instead. The wheat on his land did a little better than most. The soil there held the moisture longer. He has a barn now and better fences, and a house where Laura visits. You see laughter in that house. You see curtains in the window. You see something you no longer expect for yourself. He offers you supper. You eat more than you should because the food is good and you're tired of swallowing your own frustration. He talks about plans, more acres to break, more horses, the future. You nod and make encouraging sounds. You're happy for him. You are. You also feel something else. Not jealousy. Not exactly. More like standing on the same trail and realizing he found a solid path while your feet are still sinking. On the way back to town, the prairie stretches around you, endless and empty. The sky is wide, the stars are bright. The land looks peaceful, as if drought and grasshoppers and falling wheat prices are stories whispered in another world. You know better. Peace is just the silence between blows. By 1884, you have been in DeSmet long enough to see patterns. Good years followed by bad, rain followed by drought, promises followed by quietly broken agreements. Your store still stands on Main Street. The sign is weathered but legible. People still come in. They buy flour, kerosene, salt, nails, and the countless small things that keep farms running. To a stranger stepping off the train, your business might look solid, established, reliable. You know the truth lives in your books. On a cold autumn evening, you lock the door early. The lamps cast a yellow glow over the shelves. You place the ledger on the counter, open it to the first page, and start reading. Every name is a person you know. Every number is a story you watched unfold. A man who lost half his crop to drought. A widow whose husband died in a blizzard 3 winters ago. A family whose barn burned, taking their livestock with it. Every time you extended what little you could. A bit of credit. A delayed payment. A cheaper price than you should have charged. You have been trying to keep everyone afloat. Tonight, you ask the question you have avoided. Can you keep yourself afloat? You sharpen a pencil. You add the columns carefully. You subtract what has been paid. You carry numbers from one page to another. The total at the end is not a surprise. You have felt it living under your ribs for years. If every debt in this book were paid in full tomorrow, you would be whole again. Not rich, not prosperous, just whole. Free of what you owe to Minnesota. Able to restock without begging and bargaining. You set the pencil down, because you know those debts will not be paid in full, not tomorrow, not ever. Some of the men in those pages have already left Dakota. Their debts are ghosts. Some are dead. Their debts are graves. Some are still here, hanging on by fingernails and splinters. Their debts are living wounds that cannot be reopened without making the whole town bleed. You close the ledger and feel something inside you close with it. Not hope exactly. Hope died a while ago, quietly, without fuss. What dies tonight is the illusion that you're one good harvest away from catching up. The next morning you visit the bank again, not to ask for a loan. That bridge has been burned so thoroughly there is not even ash left. But to ask a simpler question. If I sold the building, you say, what do you reckon it would bring? The banker looks at you over steepled fingers. Depends on the buyer, he says. This is not a bad location. Near the depot, solid structure. But there are more sellers than buyers these days. You knew he would say that. Men are leaving Dakota quietly now. The boom that brought them here has turned into something else. The ones who stay are either deeply rooted or too broke to move. You walk back to the store and look at it as if you have never seen it before. The scuffed threshold, the glass windows you once polished until they shone, the stove that kept half the town alive during the long winter. Every board, every nail, every shelf represents work. Your work. You imagine someone else standing behind this counter, some new merchant with fresh capital and a clean ledger. Maybe he will succeed where you failed. Maybe he will last another decade before drought and prices and railroads grind him down too. You cannot decide which thought is worse. That evening Almanzo drops by. He leans against the counter, talking easily about his plans with Laura. They have been married now. Their lives intertwine in practical ways. She teaches, sews, helps with farm work, stretches every dollar in ways that amaze even you. Together they are fighting the same battles you are, but they are doing it as a pair. Come out for supper tomorrow, he says. Laura's trying a new way of cooking beans. Says it'll make them taste like something worth chewing. You agree. You will go. You're tired of eating alone, tired of listening only to your own thoughts bouncing around inside these walls. After he leaves, you stand in the quiet and realize that almost every voice that matters to you now belongs to someone who is not depending on this store to survive. Your customers depend on it, your family depends on you, but your future does not seem to. The turning point comes on a day that by itself is unremarkable. A man you barely know walks in. He asks if you are willing to sell, not today, not tomorrow, but soon. He has a bit of money from relatives back east. He believes DeSmet will still grow. He wants a business, and your store is already in the right place. You do not answer right away. You pour him coffee. You talk about prices, stock, the cost of hauling goods. You lay out the numbers plainly without dressing them up. He listens. He nods. He does not flinch. You recognize something in him. Your own face from 5 years ago, when you stepped off the train with capital in your pocket and a future in your hands. When he leaves, he says, "Think on it, Mr. Wilder. I'm in no rush, but this town will need a feed store whether you run it or I do. Whether you run it or I do." The words hang in the air long after the door closes. That night you walk farther than usual, out past the last buildings, over the tracks, onto the open prairie. The wind is sharp, the stars are clear. You feel very small and very tired. You think of Malone, New York, where you were born. You think of Spring Valley, Minnesota, where you proved you could make a living. You think of DeSmet, where you proved that making a living and keeping it are not the same thing. You also think of something else, something quieter, how easily a man can vanish from a story. When people speak of the Wilder family now, they mean Almanzo, the clever farmer, the horseman, the one who married the girl who writes. Your role has already started to blur even while you are still alive to hear it. Royal? Oh yes. He had a store once. Then times turned against him. You can almost hear that sentence being spoken in some future parlour, long after you're gone, softly, politely, without malice, without understanding. You stand in the dark and ask yourself a question aloud, because saying it in your own head is no longer enough. How much more of myself do I owe this place? The wind does not answer. The prairie never does. But in the silence that follows, you realize you already know. When you turn back toward town, DeSmet looks small against the horizon. A few scattered lamps, a faint line of smoke from chimneys, the outlines of buildings you helped anchor simply by being one of the first to believe this place could become more than survey stakes and grass. You walk toward it knowing that, sooner or later, you will also walk away. Not tonight, not tomorrow. But the decision has shifted from if to when, and far in the future, when your younger brother's life is bound into books and his name is carved lovingly in stone, your own story will lie between the lines, present in every gap, every silence, every unexplained turn where the narrative simply says, "Royal went away." You know now what that sentence will cost. You're starting to understand that you will pay it. August 25th, 1885. You stand outside the Congregational Church in DeSmet wearing your best suit. The jacket is tight across your shoulders because you have not worn it in 3 years, and 3 years of frontier labour have changed your body in ways that tailors in Minnesota never anticipated. The collar scratches your neck. Your boots are polished but cracked along the seams. You are 38 years old, unmarried, watching your younger brother get married. The church is small and plain, built from lumber that still smells faintly of sap and sawdust. The pews are crowded with families you know by name and debt. The Ingalls family sits in the front row. Charles looks older than his years, his beard streaked with grey. Carolyn sits straight-backed and dignified, wearing a dress she sewed herself. The younger girls fidget. Mary, the blind one, sits perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. Reverend Brown stands at the front, his Bible open, waiting. Then the door opens, and Laura Ingalls walks down the aisle on her father's arm. She is 19 years old, small and thin, with dark hair pinned carefully beneath a simple hat. Her dress is not white. She could not afford white. It is a dark cashmere, practical and plain, the kind of dress a frontier bride wears when she understands that clothing must survive more than one wearing. She does not smile widely. Her face is serious, almost solemn, as if she's fully aware that marriage on the Dakota Prairie is not a romance, but a partnership formed for survival. Almanzo waits for her at the altar. He's 28 years old, your younger brother by 10 years. He looks nervous and proud and young in a way that makes your chest tighten. His suit is new, his hair is combed, his hands are clean for perhaps the first time since he arrived in Dakota 6 years ago. You watch them speak their vows. The words are traditional: love, honour, cherish. For better or worse, in sickness and health, until death separates them. The Reverend's voice fills the small church. The congregation is silent except for the occasional cough or shuffling of feet. When the Reverend pronounces them man and wife, Almanzo kisses Laura briefly. The congregation applauds, someone laughs, someone else wipes their eyes. Weddings on the frontier are rare enough to feel like victories against the land itself. You clap along with everyone else. You smile because it is expected. You're happy for them. You are. But something else lives under that happiness. Something you do not want to name but cannot ignore. Almanzo has just done something you have not managed to do in 38 years. He has found a partner, not just a wife in the legal sense, but someone who will work beside him, stretch dollars with him, survive winters and droughts and grasshopper plagues with him. Laura is a teacher. She can earn money when crops fail. She can sew, cook, manage a household on almost nothing. She is young, but she's not soft. The Prairie has already taught her what it costs to live here. Together they are stronger than either would be alone. You are still alone. At the reception, held in a borrowed hall with borrowed chairs, you drink weak punch and eat cake that someone made with precious sugar and eggs. People congratulate Almanzo. They shake his hand, clap his shoulder, joke about what married life will teach him. Women cluster around Laura, offering advice in low voices. The young girls stare at her with envy and hope. You stand near the wall and watch. You are part of this family. You are Almanzo's brother, his elder, the one who arrived in Dakota first and showed him where to file his claim. You helped him build his first shanty. You sold him seed on credit when he had no money. You survived the long winter in the same buried town, breathing the same frozen air. But you are not the centre of this story anymore. You are the edge. Eliza Jane, your sister, stands beside you for a while. She's a school teacher, fierce and independent in ways that make some men uncomfortable. She has opinions about everything and the confidence to share them. She does not particularly like Laura. You can tell by the way she watches the bride with narrow eyes. She is very young, Eliza Jane says quietly. So is Almanzo, you reply. He should have waited, established himself more firmly before taking on a wife. You do not answer, because Eliza Jane is wrong. Almanzo is doing exactly what he should be doing. Waiting on the frontier does not make you stronger. It makes you older and more alone. The window for building a family is small. If you wait too long, the opportunity closes, and you become the kind of man who stands at his brother's wedding wondering where the years went. You become you. Later, after the cake is eaten and the punch is gone, you walk back to your store alone. The sun is setting. The sky is streaked with red and orange light that makes the prairie look almost beautiful, almost forgiving. The wind is warm for once. It carries the smell of ripening wheat from the fields surrounding town. Inside your store, the silence is absolute. No voices, no laughter, no sounds of another person moving through the rooms, making the space feel lived in rather than occupied. You sit at the counter and open the ledger book out of habit. The numbers stare back at you. Income, expenses, debts owed, debts owing. The columns do not balance. They have not balanced in years. You close the book and set it aside. Outside, somewhere in the evening, Almanzo and Laura are beginning their life together. They will struggle. The land will test them. Crops will fail. Illness will come. But they will face it as two people instead of one. You blow out the lamp and sit in the darkness. The stars appear one by one through the window. The prairie night settles around you like a blanket that does not quite keep you warm. You think about all the decisions that brought you to this moment. Coming to Dakota, building the store, extending credit, surviving the long winter, staying when others left. Every choice seemed reasonable at the time. Every choice was made with care. And somehow, all those reasonable choices have led you to a dark room above an empty store, listening to the silence, while your younger brother begins the kind of life you will never have. The thought sits in your chest like a stone. You do not move for a long time. By 1886, the difference between your life and Almanzo's life has a shape you can measure. He has Laura. That sentence sounds simple, sentimental even, the kind of thing people say at weddings when they're trying to be poetic. But on the frontier, where survival is arithmetic and every resource matters, having a partner is not poetry. It is economics. Laura teaches school when the school board hires her. $15 a month for a 2-month term, $30 total. That is $30 that does not depend on rain, wheat prices, or whether the grasshoppers decide to return. It is guaranteed income in a world where nothing else is guaranteed. She sews for other families. A dress, a shirt, mending work, small amounts but they add up. $2 here, $3 there. By the end of a year, her sewing income might reach $20 or $30, not enough to live on but enough to buy seed when Almanzo's crop money runs short, enough to pay a debt that would otherwise go unpaid, enough to mean the difference between staying and leaving. She manages the household with a skill that borders on wizardry. She makes bread from flour stretched with cornmeal. She grows vegetables in a garden plot that should not produce anything in Dakota soil but somehow does because she tends it like a battlefield where surrender is not permitted. She raises chickens, sells eggs, churns butter, and trades the surplus for things they cannot grow or make. Two people working together do not just double the income, they multiply the options. When Almanzo is in the fields, Laura is earning money in town. When Laura is teaching, Almanzo is working the claim. When one stream of income dries up, the other keeps flowing. They are not wealthy, they are barely stable, but they have redundancy, and redundancy is the only kind of wealth that matters on the frontier. You have none of that. Your store limps along. Some months are better than others. Farmers buy seed in the spring, supplies in the summer, and pay their bills in the fall if the harvest is good. You extend less credit now. You have learned that lesson too well. But without credit, some customers go elsewhere. To the new merchant who opened a competing store 2 blocks down Main Street. To mail-order catalogues that promise better prices and convenient delivery by rail. The monopoly you once had is gone. DeSmet has grown enough to support multiple stores, which means you're no longer essential. You're just one option among several, and when people have options, they choose the merchant who offers the best terms, the friendliest service, the newest goods. You're none of those things anymore. You're the tired man behind the counter who says no more often than yes. The expenses never stop. Rent on the building because you never managed to buy it outright. Freight charges on goods shipped by rail. Taxes, insurance, coal for heat, kerosene for lamps. 100 small costs that nibble at the edges of your income until there's almost nothing left. You eat simply. Bread, beans, salt pork, coffee when you can afford it. You do not socialize much. You cannot afford the time or the money. While other men gather at the saloon in the evenings to trade stories and complaints, you stay in your store, calculating numbers that refuse to cooperate. One evening you visit Almanzo and Laura in the small house he built on his claim. It is not large. 2 rooms, a kitchen and a bedroom. Walls made from boards that are not quite straight. A roof that leaks when the rain is heavy, but it is theirs. Paid for with labour and lumber, no rent, no landlord. Laura serves supper, fried potatoes, bread, a bit of bacon. Simple food, but there is enough of it. She moves around the small kitchen with the efficiency of someone who has learned to make much from little. Almanzo sits at the table, relaxed in a way you rarely see him in town. He talks about his plans, more acres to break next year, a better barn, maybe a few more horses. You listen and nod and eat the food she offers. You notice the small things, the curtains she made from flour sacks, washed and sewn until they look almost like real fabric. The wooden chairs that Almanzo built in the winter when there was no field work. The shelf holding 3 books, 2 school books and a Bible, as if books are treasures to be displayed. This house is poor by any measure, but it is also loved. You can see it in the way Laura has arranged things, the way Almanzo speaks about future improvements, the way they move around each other in the cramped space without bumping or irritation, as if they have already learned the small dance of shared living. You feel like an intruder. Not because they make you feel unwelcome. They do not. Laura pours you coffee without being asked. Almanzo insists you take the better chair. They are kind. But kindness does not erase the fact that you are a guest in their shared life, while you return each night to rooms that belong only to you. On the walk back to town, the prairie stretches dark and quiet under a sky full of stars. You think about the things marriage buys. Not love. That is too abstract, too distant from the daily machinery of survival. Marriage buys partnership. It buys shared risk. It buys another set of hands when the work is too much for one person. It buys someone to talk to when the silence becomes unbearable. You had chances once. Women passed through DeSmet. Some stayed. Some married quickly. Some left when they realized the frontier was harder than the stories promised. You were always too busy, too focused on the store, too convinced that you needed to establish yourself first, build a foundation, become prosperous before adding a wife to the equation. That was the plan. Build first. Marry later. But later never came. The foundation crumbled before it was finished. The prosperity remained always 1 good year away. And while you waited, the women married other men, younger men who understood that waiting was the same as losing. Now you are 39 years old, unmarried, running a failing business, living in rooms above a store that smells like burlap and kerosene and slow defeat. The chances are gone. Not completely. There are widows occasionally and women desperate enough to consider an older man with no prospects. But you're not desperate enough to marry desperation. So you stay alone, and you watch your younger brother build the life you plan to build with a partner who makes it possible, while you calculate how many more months you can survive on shrinking margins and borrowed time. The arithmetic is brutal. 2 is greater than 1, always, in every way that matters, and you are still 1. 1888 arrives like a creditor you've been avoiding. The winter is harsh but not catastrophic. The spring rains come late, but they come. The wheat is planted on schedule. For a few weeks you allow yourself the dangerous luxury of hope. Maybe this year will be different. Maybe the margins will widen. Maybe you will finally catch up. Then the grasshoppers return. They are not as thick as the plague of 1884, but they do not need to be. The wheat is young and vulnerable. The hoppers descend in clouds that darken the afternoon sun. They eat with the methodical efficiency of machinery. Leaves, stems, anything green. The fields around DeSmet go from promising to devastated in 3 days. Farmers stand at the edges of their ruined crops and do not speak. There is nothing to say. Some of them walk back to their shanties and pack their belongings. They leave on the next train, heading east to relatives or west to try again in some other territory that does not yet know their names. The ones who stay come into your store with empty pockets and desperate eyes. Can you extend me credit? Just until next year, just until I can plant again. You want to say yes. You remember when you were the merchant who said yes, who believed that generosity would be rewarded with loyalty and eventual payment. You remember believing that helping your neighbours was the same as helping yourself. But your supplier in Minnesota has stopped shipping on credit. The letter arrived last month, polite but final. Future orders require cash payment in advance, no exceptions. Your outstanding balance must be cleared before any new credit will be extended. You owe them $470. You do not have $470. You do not have half that. You have perhaps $80 in cash and goods you can liquidate, and debts owed to you that will never be collected, because the men who owe them have already left Dakota or are standing in front of you right now asking for more credit you cannot give. I am sorry, you say. I cannot. The farmer nods. He expected this answer. Everyone is saying no now. The whole town is contracting, pulling inward, trying to protect what little remains. He leaves without arguing. He does not slam the door. Anger requires energy, and energy requires hope. And hope requires a future that still seems possible. You watch through the window as he walks down Main Street. His shoulders are bent. His stride is slow. He looks like a man who has aged 10 years in 3 days. You feel the same way. The summer crawls forward. The ruined wheat is ploughed under. Some farmers plant late crops hoping for a miracle. The miracle does not come. The rain stops. The heat rises. The soil cracks into geometric patterns that look like the land itself is breaking into pieces. Your store empties. Not all at once, gradually. A few customers a day becomes a few customers a week. The shelves that were never fully stocked now look abandoned. You stop reordering goods you cannot afford. The empty spaces grow. You consider rearranging the remaining items to fill the gaps, but you do not have the energy to pretend. One afternoon, the man who approached you 3 years ago about buying the store returns. He looks older now, less optimistic. But he still has money from his relatives in the East, and he still believes DeSmet has a future. Are you ready to sell? He asks. You do not answer immediately. You look around the store. At the counter you built with Almanzo. At the shelves you stocked with such hope in 1879. At the stove that kept people alive during the long winter. At the ledger book that records 9 years of trying and failing and trying again. What are you offering? You ask. He names a figure. It is less than half what you paid to build the place, less than the value of the lumber alone, but it is cash, and cash is the only thing that matters now. I will think about it, you say, but you have already decided. That evening you walk out to Almanzo's claim. He's in the barn tending to his horses. Prince and Lady are older now, but still strong. Almanzo has always taken better care of his horses than himself. I am thinking of leaving, you say without preamble. Almanzo stops brushing the mare. He looks at you for a long moment. He is not surprised. You can see that. He's been watching the same slow collapse you have been living. Where will you go? He asks. I do not know yet. Maybe back to Minnesota. Maybe farther west. Somewhere that does not know I failed here. You did not fail, Almanzo says. The system failed. The weather failed. The railroad, the prices, the whole damned thing failed. You just happened to be standing in the wrong place when it broke. You appreciate the kindness, but kindness does not pay debts. You should stay, Almanzo continues. We can figure something out. Maybe you can work with me, help with the farm. We are family. We are family. The words sit between you like an offer and an accusation at the same time. Because family means obligation. It means Almanzo would help you out of duty, and you would accept out of desperation, and both of you would pretend it was something other than charity. I will think about it, you say, but you have already decided. You walk back to town under a sky that has turned the colour of ash. The prairie is silent except for the wind. No birds, no insects. Even the grasshoppers have moved on now that there is nothing left to eat. Inside your store, you light a lamp and sit at the counter one last time. You open the ledger book and read through the names. Some are crossed out because they paid. Some are crossed out because they died. Some are crossed out because they vanished and you have no idea where they went or whether they are still alive. You take up a pen. You write carefully at the bottom of the final page. Accounts closed. Royal G. Wilder, September 1888. You do not write anything else. There is nothing else to say. The numbers tell the story. The gaps tell the rest. The next morning you begin packing. You do not have much. Clothes, a few tools, some personal items. The rest will stay with the building when you sell it. Let the new owner figure out what to do with empty shelves and broken dreams. You will leave DeSmet quietly. No announcements, no farewells beyond family. You will board a train heading somewhere else and become the kind of man who used to live here. The kind of man people mention occasionally when someone asks what happened to that feed store that used to be on Main Street. Oh, that was Royal Wilder's place, Almanzo's brother. He left years ago. I am not sure where he went. And like that, you will be erased. Not from records. Those will remain, filed in dusty archives where no one looks, but from memory, from the story that matters. Your brother will stay. He will survive droughts and debts and disasters of his own. And decades later, his wife will write books that millions of children will read, and in those books you will be a shadow, a figure mentioned briefly and forgotten quickly, the brother who left, the brother who failed, the brother whose name history could not be bothered to remember. September 1888. You are selling 9 years of your life for $320. The buyer counts the bills carefully on the counter where you once sold seed wheat and hope in equal measure. His hands are steady. His face shows no emotion. This is just a transaction to him. A building, a location, a business opportunity. He does not see the long winter in these walls. He does not see the names in the ledger book that will never resolve into payment. He does not see the version of yourself that arrived here in 1879 believing that arriving first meant winning. He sees lumber and potential. Nothing more. You sign the papers. Your handwriting is smaller than it used to be. Tighter, as if even your signature is trying to take up less space in the world. The buyer shakes your hand. He wishes you well. He means it. He is not a cruel man. He simply does not understand that he is buying the shell of something that died years ago and has only now stopped pretending to be alive. I will take good care of the place, he says. You nod. You do not tell him that the place does not need care. It needs a miracle. It needs weather that cooperates and prices that stabilize and customers with money to spend. It needs a world that does not exist and probably never did. You walk out of the store, his store now, and do not look back. Looking back serves no purpose. The building will stand whether you look at it or not. Main Street will continue. DeSmet will grow or shrink or disappear entirely, and none of it will depend on whether Royal Wilder stayed or left. You are not essential. You never were. That is perhaps the hardest lesson the Prairie teaches, that a man can work himself to exhaustion, plan with intelligence, sacrifice comfort and health and years, and still the world will continue without noticing his absence. The money from the sale goes to debts. The supplier in Minnesota receives $200. It does not clear what you owe, but it is enough to end the letters, enough to close the account without lawyers or courts. The remaining $120 is divided among smaller creditors, the landlord who rented you the building, the freight company, the bank, though they gave up on you long ago. When the debts are paid, you have $43 left. $43 is what 9 years in Dakota Territory have earned you. Not 9 years of profit. 9 years total. Every transaction, every sale, every gamble on credit that might be repaid. It all adds up to $43 and a train ticket to somewhere else. You visit Almanzo and Laura one last time. Their house is warmer now. They have added a small room for their daughter Rose, born 2 years ago. The baby is dark-haired like her mother, serious-eyed, watching you with an intensity that feels unnerving in someone so small. Laura serves coffee, real coffee. Not the burned grain substitute you drank during the long winter. She has purchased small luxuries now, not many, not often, but enough to show that their situation is improving in ways yours never did. You could stay, Almanzo says again. Work the farm with me, we could use the help. He means it. Your brother is not offering out of pity. He genuinely believes that two men working together could accomplish more than one. He is probably right. But accepting his offer means becoming the dependent brother, the one who failed, the one who needs rescuing. You cannot do it. Pride is expensive, but it is the only thing you have left that no creditor can claim. I appreciate it, you say, but I need to try somewhere new, somewhere that does not know what I could not accomplish here. Laura nods. She understands this in a way Almanzo does not. She has moved repeatedly throughout her childhood, following her father's failures from place to place. She knows what it means to leave before the leaving becomes unbearable. Eliza Jane is more direct. Your sister has never softened her opinions for anyone's comfort. You're making a mistake, she says. Running away solves nothing. You will carry the same problems to wherever you go next. She's probably right. But staying guarantees failure. Leaving at least offers the possibility of something different, even if different is not the same as better. You embrace your brother. He holds you tightly for a moment, and you feel the difference in your bodies. He is still strong, still young enough that the land has not broken him. You're 41 years old and feel 60. Right when you settle, he says, you promise you will. You probably will not. Letters require an address that feels permanent, and you cannot imagine feeling permanent anywhere ever again. The train leaves at dawn. You board with a single bag containing everything you own. The locomotive pulls away from the depot where you once watched supplies arrive with such hope. The town shrinks behind you. The prairie opens ahead, grass and sky and distance. You do not cry. You passed crying somewhere around 1885 when you realize that tears change nothing. You sit in the wooden seat and watch Dakota Territory disappear and feel nothing except a hollow relief that the struggle is finally over. You lost. The land won. And now you are free to lose somewhere else. The train carries you east. Not home, you have no home, but toward places that feel less like punishment. Minnesota, Wisconsin. States where rain falls with regularity and trees grow without irrigation, and failure does not announce itself in clouds of grasshoppers. You stop in Spring Valley, Minnesota. This is where the Wilder family lived before Dakota, where you saved the money you later lost. The town is smaller than you remember, or perhaps you have grown accustomed to measuring places by their disappointments rather than their size. You find work, manual labor, loading freight cars, repairing fences, work that requires your back but not your judgment. Work that pays daily wages and demands nothing except that you show up and follow instructions. After 9 years of making decisions that turned out wrong, there is a strange comfort in being told what to do. You rent a room above a boarding house. 1 room, 1 window, a bed and a chair and a small table. You eat meals downstairs with other men who are also alone. Drifters, labourers, men whose lives did not turn out the way they planned. No one asks about your past. No one offers their own. You exist in parallel silence, sharing space but not stories. At night you lie awake and calculate. Not business calculations anymore. Those are finished. You calculate time instead. You are 41 years old. If you live to 60, that is 19 years remaining. If you save half your wages, you will accumulate perhaps $600 by the time you're too old to work. $600 is not enough to retire, not enough to buy land, barely enough to keep yourself fed and housed until your body gives out. The arithmetic is bleak, but at least it is honest. No more pretending that next year will be better. No more extending credit to people who cannot pay. No more believing that hard work guarantees anything except exhaustion. You work in Minnesota for 2 years, then 3. The seasons change. Winter, spring, summer, fall. The cycle repeats and means nothing except that you're still alive and still working and still alone. Letters arrive occasionally from Almanzo. He writes about the farm, about rows growing, about crops that are better some years and worse others. His tone is optimistic in the way people are when they are writing to someone they pity. He does not mention Laura's writing, not yet. She's not begun the books that will make them famous. She's just a farmer's wife with a daughter and a past she has not yet transformed into literature. You do not write back often. What would you say? That you're loading freight cars? That you live in a rented room? That the most interesting thing that happened this month was a broken axle on a delivery wagon? Your life has become so small that describing it feels like admitting defeat all over again. The years pass. 1890, 1891, 1892. The panic of 1893 hits, banks fail, businesses close, men who had work are suddenly idle. You lose your job at the freight yard. You find another, you lose that one too. The economy contracts like a fist closing, and men like you, middle-aged, unspecialized, alone, are the first to be squeezed out. You move west again, not to Dakota, never to Dakota, but to towns along the railroad where work might exist. You become the kind of man you once saw stepping off trains in DeSmet. No capital, no connections. Just willingness to work and fading hope that somewhere, somehow, things will improve. You work in grain elevators, you repair buildings, you do carpentry when someone needs it. You're skilled enough to be useful and desperate enough to accept whatever wages are offered. This is what 45 years old looks like when you have nothing saved and no family depending on you and no place that claims you as its own. The century turns. 1900 arrives. The newspapers celebrate. A new century. New possibilities. The frontier is officially closed now. The government declared it so. All the land has been claimed. All the opportunities seized. The age of expansion is over. You read this in a newspaper in a town whose name you will forget within a year. You think about DeSmet, about the feed store, about the belief that claiming land first meant winning. The frontier closed and you were standing on it when it slammed shut. You move again and again. Towns blur together. Faces become interchangeable. You are 50 years old, then 55. Your body aches in the mornings. Your hands are stiff. The work that was merely hard at 40 becomes painful at 55. You hear news of Almanzo occasionally, through letters, through travellers who knew someone who knew the Wilders in Missouri. They left Dakota in 1894, moving to the Ozarks where the land was cheaper and the weather less brutal. They struggled there too. Fire, illness, debt. But they survived. They stayed together. Laura wrote articles for newspapers, small payments, enough to help. And then, sometime around 1932, you hear that she has written books, children's books about her childhood, about pioneer life, about the long winter and the brave young men who saved the town. You do not read them. You tell yourself you're not interested in children's stories, but the real reason is simpler. You know what those books will say. You know who will be the hero, and you know who will be erased. 1925. You are 78 years old. Your body is failing in the methodical way bodies do when they have been used hard and maintained poorly. Your lungs are weak, your heart labours, your joints ache with every movement. You live in Louisiana now, though you do not remember deciding to come here. You simply arrived one year, found work, and stayed because leaving required energy you no longer possess. You married. Late. Too late for children. Her name is Mary, or Margaret. The records will conflict and no one will care enough to resolve the discrepancy. She's a widow, alone like you. You married for companionship and practical support. She cooks. You provide what little income your failing body can still earn. It is not love, but it is not loneliness either. You sit on the porch of a rented house in a small Louisiana town. The heat is thick and wet, nothing like the dry Dakota wind you remember. The trees are different. The birds sound different. Everything is different except you. You think about DeSmet more often now. Memory becomes unreliable in old age, but certain moments remain sharp. The sound of hammers when you built the store. The taste of bread made from coffee mill flour during the long winter. The weight of the ledger book. The morning you signed the papers and walked away. You do not think about these things because you want to. You think about them because your mind returns to the places where it was most alive, and you were never more alive than during those 9 years when you believed you were building something permanent. Eliza Jane died 3 years ago. You received a letter. You did not attend the funeral. The distance was too great, and your body too weak. Almanzo is still alive in Missouri, still farming, still married to Laura. Their daughter Rose has become a writer too. Successful. Famous even. The Wilder family produces stories now instead of wheat. No one tells stories about you. You understand why. Your story has no arc, no climax, no resolution. You arrived, you worked, you failed, you left. That is the entire narrative. There is no dramatic wheat-buying expedition, no heroic survival, no marriage to a woman who will write books that preserve your name. You are the brother who represents what the frontier did to most people. You are the statistical majority, the 80% who failed, the forgotten men who built towns and businesses and dreams, and watched them all collapse under weather and economics and simple bad luck. History does not remember the majority. History remembers exceptions, the ones who succeeded against odds, the ones who married storytellers, the ones who became legends. You sit on the porch and watch the sun set over Louisiana. The light is different here, softer. The sky turns shades of purple and orange that you never saw in Dakota. It is beautiful in a way that makes you feel nothing. Beauty requires the capacity to hope, and you have not hoped in decades. You think about the moment in 1879 when you drove stakes into Dakota soil and believed you were claiming the future. You were 32 years old, strong, confident, capitalized. You had every advantage except the one that mattered. You had no luck. Or perhaps luck is the wrong word. Perhaps what you lacked was narrative. The story that would make sense of the suffering. The arc that would transform failure into triumph or tragedy into meaning. You just failed. Quietly. Gradually. The way most people fail. And then you disappeared. In 1932, 7 years after you die, Laura Ingalls Wilder will publish a book called Little House in the Big Woods. It will be followed by others. Little House on the Prairie, on the banks of Plum Creek, by the shores of Silver Lake, The Long Winter, Little Town on the Prairie, these happy golden years, the first 4 years. Millions of children will read them. They will fall in love with the Ingalls family and the Wilder family and the story of pioneers building lives on the frontier. They will learn about Pa's fiddle and Ma's cooking and Laura's brown braids and Almanzo's beautiful horses. Some of those books will mention you, briefly. Royal Wilder, Almanzo's older brother, who had a feed store. A sentence, maybe two, just enough to place you in the landscape and then move past you toward the important parts of the story. The children reading will not wonder what happened to Royal. They will not ask why he is mentioned so briefly. They will not notice that the heroic wheat-buying expedition might have involved the merchant whose inventory was at stake. They will not question why the older brother, the one with capital and experience, disappears from the narrative while the younger brother becomes immortal. They will simply turn the page, and that is how you will be remembered. As the man who was not important enough to slow down the story, the footnote, the erasure, the silence between sentences. You die in Louisiana in September 1925, 78 years old. No obituary in any newspaper that survives, no grave marker that tourists will visit, no legacy except a few lines in government records filed in buildings where no one looks. The Wilder family line continues through Almanzo and Laura and Rose. The name persists, but your branch ends with you. No children, no descendants, no one to carry forward even the memory of a man who once believed that arriving first in DeSmet, Dakota Territory, meant something. The prairie you left behind has changed. The grasshoppers still come sometimes, but farmers have learned to manage them. The droughts still arrive, but irrigation helps. The railroad that once held the town hostage is just one option among many. DeSmet survives, grows, becomes the kind of stable, small town you dreamed it would be. Just 30 years too late for you. On the porch in Louisiana in the days before you die, you think one final time about the store on Main Street, about the shelves you stocked with such care, about the ledger book with its columns that never balanced, about the moment you signed it all away for $320 and walked out into a morning that felt like ending. You wonder if the buyer made it work, whether he succeeded where you failed, whether the building still stands or was torn down years ago to make room for something newer and more profitable. You will never know. And it does not matter, because success or failure, the building exists without you. The town exists without you. The story exists without you. You close your eyes against the Louisiana sun. Your breathing is shallow. Your wife is somewhere inside the house, unaware that these are your last conscious moments. There is no drama, no final words, no revelation. You simply stop, the way a business stops when the doors close, the way a chapter ends when the reader turns the page. And in the vast silence that follows, no one notices, because Royal Gould Wilder has already been forgotten by everyone except the records, and the records do not care whether anyone remembers. The prairie wind blows over DeSmet. The grass grows where your store once stood, and history moves forward, writing itself with the names it chooses to keep and erasing the rest without mercy or apology. You are the rest. 1932. Royal Wilder has been dead for 7 years. He's buried in Louisiana in a grave that will eventually lose its marker. His widow has remarried or died. The records conflict. No one investigates. Royal is the kind of dead that history treats as complete, final, erased. But in Mansfield, Missouri, his sister-in-law is writing. Laura Ingalls Wilder is 65 years old. Her hair is white. Her hands are gnarled from decades of farm work. She sits at a desk in the farmhouse that she and Almanzo built, with money they barely had, and she writes about her childhood. Not for herself, for publication, for money. Because even after 50 years of marriage and struggle, the Wilders are not prosperous. They are surviving. Barely. Her daughter Rose is a successful writer. Articles, stories, ghostwriting for famous people. Rose understands markets. She understands what sells. And she understands that her mother's pioneer childhood, properly shaped, could become something valuable. Laura writes in longhand, page after page of memories from the 1870s and 80s. Wisconsin, Kansas, Minnesota, Dakota Territory, the places her family moved, chasing Pa's restless dreams and Ma's exhausted hope. She writes about the big woods, the prairie, the dugout on Plum Creek, the surveyor's house in Dakota, the long winter. She writes about Almanzo, the handsome farmer boy with Morgan horses, the steady young man who courted her with buggy rides, the husband who worked beside her through drought and debt and disasters that would have broken weaker partnerships. She writes him as a hero, not perfect. Laura is too smart to make him perfect, but good, honourable, brave in the quiet ways that matter. She does not write much about Royal. Oh, he appears, briefly. Almanzo's older brother Royal, who ran a feed store in DeSmet. A sentence establishing that he existed, that he was present during the long winter, that he was part of the Wilder family network that helped the town survive, but Royal gets no scenes of his own. No dialogue that reveals character, no moments where the reader understands who he was or what he wanted or why he disappeared from the family story. He is scenery, background, a name mentioned to establish context and then forgotten as Laura moves toward the important parts. The parts about her, about Almanzo, about the love story that readers will want. Laura is making choices. Every writer makes choices. Which details to include, which to exclude, which people to develop into characters and which to leave as shadows. These choices are not malicious. They are practical. A book has limited space. Readers have limited patience. You cannot tell every story. You must choose the stories that serve the narrative you are building. Laura chooses to build a narrative about survival and love and the frontier as a place where good people triumph through virtue and hard work. Royal does not fit that narrative. Royal represents failure, defeat. The 80% who left with nothing, including Royal, would complicate the story, would introduce questions that have no satisfying answers. Why did Royal fail while Almanzo survived? Was it bad luck? Poor planning? The lack of a wife? The weight of arriving first and bearing the full brunt of the long winter? These questions would require exploration, nuance, complexity. They would slow down the romance between Almanzo and Laura. They would make the frontier feel less like an adventure and more like a trap. So Laura makes the choice that thousands of writers make. She simplifies, she focuses. She centers the story on the people who stayed and succeeded, and she pushes the people who left and failed to the margins. Royal becomes a footnote. Rose edits her mother's manuscript. Rose is a professional. She knows how to tighten prose, how to sharpen scenes, how to remove anything that does not serve the forward momentum of the story. If Laura included too much about Royal, Rose cuts it. If Laura mentioned Royal's departure, Rose suggests minimizing it. Not because Rose is cruel, because Rose understands publishing. Children's books must be optimistic. They must show that hard work is rewarded, that good people prosper, that the world, despite its hardships, is fundamentally fair. Royal's story teaches the opposite lesson, that you can work hard and plan carefully and still lose everything, that the world is not fair. That arriving first does not guarantee winning. That is not a lesson publishers want to sell to children in 1932, not during the Depression, not when families are struggling and need stories of hope. So Royal is edited out, reduced, minimized. His failure is too depressing, his departure too anticlimactic, his entire life too much of a reminder that most pioneer stories ended badly. The manuscript is titled Pioneer Girl. It is too long, too adult, too dark in places. Publishers reject it. Laura revises, Rose helps. They reshape the material into something more focused. They split it into multiple books. They soften the hardest edges. They add warmth and remove bitterness. The first book, Little House in the Big Woods, is published in 1932. It becomes a success, not huge, not immediate, but steady. Children read it, teachers assign it, libraries stock it, the checks arrive. Small at first, then larger. Laura writes more books, 1 per year, sometimes 2. Farmer Boy, in 1933. This one is about Almanzo's childhood in New York. Royal appears here too, the older brother, the one who helps on the farm. He has a few lines, a few scenes. But the book is about Almanzo, about his relationship with his father, about learning to work with horses. Royal is background, again. Little House on the Prairie in 1935. Royal is not in this one. He has not entered the family story yet. The book is pure Ingalls family. Pa and Ma and the girls. On the banks of Plum Creek in 1937. Still no Royal. He's back in New York or Minnesota, living a life that Laura never witnessed and therefore cannot write about. By the shores of Silver Lake in 1939. The family reaches Dakota Territory. Laura is 12 years old in this book. She notices Almanzo for the first time. He is 21. The book does not mention that he lied about his age to file his claim. That would complicate the heroic image. Royal appears briefly. He is mentioned as Almanzo's brother, a feed store owner. Present, but not important. Then comes The Long Winter in 1940. This is the book where Royal should matter. This is the book about the 7 months of blizzards, the buried town, the depleted supplies, the desperate hunger, the wheat-buying expedition that saved everyone. Royal's store is central to this crisis. His inventory is what runs out. His capital is what is lost. His business is what collapses under the weight of isolation and unpaid debts. If you were telling Royal's story, The Long Winter would be the climax. The moment where everything he built is destroyed by forces beyond his control. But Laura is not telling Royal's story. She is telling hers. And in her version, the wheat-buying expedition belongs to Almanzo and Cap Garland. The 2 young men who risk death to ride 12 miles south and purchase wheat from a farmer. The heroes who saved the town. Royal is mentioned. He is in town during the winter, but his role is minimized. He is not part of the expedition. He is not shown struggling with his failing business. He is just there, present, forgettable. The book becomes one of Laura's most popular. The drama of the blizzards, the tension of survival, the heroism of the wheat buyers. It is everything readers want from a pioneer story. Danger, courage, triumph, and Royal remains invisible. 1943. These Happy Golden Years is published. This is the book about Laura's courtship and marriage to Almanzo. It is romantic, tender, full of buggy rides and hopeful conversations and the slow building of a partnership that will endure decades of hardship. Almanzo is perfect in this book, not literally. Laura is too honest for that. But he is perfect in the ways that matter to the story. Patient, kind, hard-working. He courts Laura with respect. He waits for her to be ready. He builds a house for their future. He is everything a romantic hero should be. Royal appears in one scene, maybe two. He is background, a figure standing in a doorway, a name mentioned in passing. He has no dialogue that matters. No personality that emerges. He is a prop in Almanzo's story. The book ends with Laura and Almanzo's wedding. Happy, golden. The title promises and the story delivers. Readers close the book feeling satisfied. The pioneer girl found love. The handsome farmer boy won her heart. They will face hardships ahead. Laura hints at that, but they will face them together. Royal is not at their wedding in the book. He may have been at the real wedding. Probably was. But Laura does not include him. There is no scene where Royal congratulates his younger brother. No moment where the reader sees the older brother watching the younger brother begin the life he himself will never have, because including that scene would change the tone. It would introduce melancholy into a happy ending. It would remind readers that not everyone gets the golden years. Some people get forgotten years, discarded years, years that history does not bother to record. The books are wildly successful. By the 1950s, they are classics. Children across America read them in school. Families read them aloud. The Little House books become part of American mythology. The story of pioneers, of westward expansion, of virtuous people building a nation through hard work and moral character. The books teach lessons, that perseverance is rewarded, that family is everything, that the frontier was hard but fair, that good people who work hard will prosper. These lessons are lies, not complete lies, but simplifications so extreme they become false. The frontier was not fair. Hard work was not rewarded consistently. Most pioneers did not prosper. Most left broke or died trying. But those truths do not sell books to children. Those truths do not comfort families during the Depression or World War II or the Cold War. Those truths do not support the American mythology of progress and opportunity and manifest destiny. So Laura's books, with Rose's help, tell the version of the frontier that America wants to believe, and Royal Wilder, who represents the uncomfortable truth, is edited out of the national memory. Almanzo dies in 1949. He is 92 years old if you believe the tombstone, 89 if you believe the census records. His funeral is attended by townspeople and family. His obituary appears in the local newspaper. He is remembered as a pioneer, a farmer. The husband of Laura Ingalls Wilder, the famous author. Royal died 24 years earlier. No one mentions this at Almanzo's funeral. Why would they? Royal is not part of the story that matters. He left Dakota in 1888. He was gone for 61 years before Almanzo died. He might as well have never existed for all the impact he had on the final narrative. Laura dies in 1957. She is 90 years old. Her obituaries are long and detailed. The famous author, the pioneer woman, the voice of American frontier experience. Her books have sold millions of copies. They will continue selling millions more. Generations of children who have not yet been born will read about her life and believe they understand what the frontier was like. The obituaries mention Almanzo, the devoted husband. The farmer boy from the books. They mention Rose, the daughter, the writer who helped shape her mother's legacy. They do not mention Royal. He is not important enough to include in the summary of Laura's life. He was her brother-in-law. He lived in the same town during the same years she wrote about, but he is not part of the story the obituaries are telling. By the 1970s, the Little House books are adapted for television. Little House on the Prairie becomes one of the most popular shows in America. Michael Landon plays Pa. Karen Grassel plays Ma. Melissa Gilbert plays Laura. The show runs for 9 seasons. Millions of people watch every week. Royal does not appear in the show, not once. The writers have no reason to include him. He is not in the books in any significant way. He serves no narrative purpose. The show is about the Ingalls family, about their struggles and triumphs, about love and community and American values. Royal represents none of those things, so he simply does not exist in the television version of history. Scholars begin studying Laura's books. Academic papers are written. Biographies are published. Researchers dig through archives, looking at census records and homestead files and newspaper clippings. They find discrepancies. They discover that Laura changed timelines, that she combined characters, that some events described in the books never happened, while other events that did happen were omitted entirely. They find Royal. Not much, but something. Homestead records showing he filed a claim in 1879. Business records showing he operated a feed store. Census data placing him in DeSmet during the long winter. Evidence that he left sometime in the late 1880s. A death record in Louisiana in 1925. The scholars note these findings in footnotes, in appendices, in the careful dry language of academic research. They do not make a big deal of Royal's absence from the books. They simply note it. The older brother, the merchant, the one who left. Interesting, but not central to understanding Laura's literary achievement. Because the scholars are studying Laura, not Royal. Royal is context, background information, a historical detail that helps place the books in their proper setting, but does not change the interpretation of the books themselves. Royal remains a footnote in the academic literature, just as he was a footnote in Laura's books. Tourists visit DeSmet. They walk down Main Street. They see the Ingalls home, preserved as a museum. They see the surveyor's house where the family lived during the long winter. They see markers indicating where Almanzo's claim was located. They buy souvenirs. They take photographs. They feel connected to the pioneer past. No marker indicates where Royal's feed store stood. No tour mentions his name. No museum display explains his role in the town's survival during the long winter, or his subsequent failure and departure. He is not part of the heritage tourism industry. He is not part of the story that visitors come to experience. The Little House sites preserve the story that Laura wrote, and in that story, Royal does not exist in any way that requires remembering. This is how erasure works, not through active destruction, not through malicious intent, but through 1,000 small choices. To tell this story instead of that one, to develop this character instead of that one, to focus on success instead of failure, to simplify instead of complicate, to comfort instead of disturb. Each choice is reasonable, each serves a purpose, but together they create a narrative so powerful that it replaces reality. The books become the history, the simplified version becomes the truth, and the people who do not fit the narrative vanish. Royal Gould. Wilder vanished, not because anyone hated him, not because he did anything wrong, but because his story was inconvenient, depressing, complicated, true in ways that did not serve the mythology America wanted to tell about itself. So he was edited out, reduced to a sentence, a name without character, a presence without meaning. A brother who existed just enough to prove Almanzo had family, but not enough to matter. And the world moved on without him, without his story, without any acknowledgement that his failure was more representative of the frontier experience than Almanzo's survival. The books sit on shelves in millions of homes. Children read them tonight, tomorrow, next year. They will learn about Laura and Pa and Ma and Almanzo. They will learn about covered wagons and homesteads and blizzards and wheat-buying expeditions. They will never learn about Royal, because Royal was deleted from the story before the story was published, and once history is printed, the erasure becomes permanent. 21st century. You are not Royal Wilder anymore, you are a reader, a researcher. Someone who has stumbled across a gap in the narrative and wondered what lived there. You have read the Little House books. You loved them as a child, or you discovered them as an adult. You remember Pa's fiddle, Ma's patience, Laura's braids, Almanzo's beautiful horses, the long winter, the wheat that saved the town. You do not remember Royal. Why would you? He's barely there. But then you read a biography, or you visit an archive, or you search genealogical records out of curiosity, and you find him, Almanzo's older brother, born 1847, died 1925, homesteaded in Dakota Territory, ran a feed store, left sometime in the late 1880s, married late, died in Louisiana, no children. That is the whole biography, a few sentences, a handful of dates, a life that can be summarized in one paragraph. You wonder why Laura barely mentioned him. You wonder what happened between the brothers. You wonder whether Royal was present during the wheat-buying expedition, whether he financed it, whether he organized it, whether the heroic story that made Almanzo famous was actually Royal's story, stolen through narrative silence. You cannot know. The evidence is too thin. Royal left no letters, no diary, no memoir. His voice is completely absent from the historical record. Everything you know about him is mediated through other people's documents, census takers, land office clerks, Laura's books, obituaries that may or may not be accurate. You're looking at a man through layers of silence, trying to reconstruct a life from gaps and omissions and the faint traces he left in bureaucratic records. This is what happens to most people. Not just Royal. Most humans who have ever lived left no record, no story, no voice. They were born, they worked, they struggled, they died, and the world moved on without pausing to document their existence. But Royal is different. Royal is silent even though he lived at the exact moment and place that Laura chose to write about. He should be in the story. He was there, he mattered. His feed store mattered, his capital mattered, his failure mattered. But Laura chose not to tell his story, and that choice tells you something important. It tells you that history is not about what happened. History is about what someone decided was worth remembering, and that decision is always political, always shaped by the needs of the present, always serving a purpose beyond simple documentation. Laura needed to tell a story about pioneer success, about love and family and triumph over hardship. Including Royal would have complicated that story, would have introduced ambiguity, would have forced readers to confront the fact that most pioneers failed, that hard work was not enough, that the frontier destroyed more people than it elevated. So Royal was sacrificed, not with malice, but with cold narrative logic. His story did not serve the larger purpose, therefore his story was not told. This happens constantly, in every family, in every community, in every nation. Someone decides which stories matter, which voices deserve preservation, which lives are worth remembering, and everyone else fades into silence. Royal faded. But his silence teaches. It teaches that absence is a choice, that the gaps in history are as meaningful as the content, that who gets remembered and who gets forgotten reveals what a culture values. America values success, innovation, progress, the stories of people who overcame obstacles and achieved their dreams. These are the stories that get told and retold, the stories that get carved into stone and printed in books and taught in schools. America does not value failure, especially quiet failure, especially the failure of ordinary people doing ordinary work who simply could not survive the systems they were trapped in. Those stories are depressing, uncomfortable. They do not inspire, they do not comfort, they do not support the mythology of opportunity and meritocracy. So those stories are buried, not with ceremony, just with silence. Royal silence teaches that the Little House books, for all their beauty and power, are propaganda, not lies. Propaganda. They tell a version of the frontier that is true enough to be believable, but simplified enough to be comforting. They erase the structural violence of westward expansion, the theft of indigenous land, the exploitation of settlers by railroads and banks, the environmental destruction, the countless failures. They tell a story America wanted to hear. And Royal did not fit that story. His silence also teaches that families control narratives. Laura decided how the Wilder family would be remembered. She chose to centre Almanzo, to make him the hero, to minimise Royal, to erase the complexity of sibling relationships and economic competition and the ways failure reshapes family hierarchies. She had reasons, protecting Almanzo's dignity, protecting her marriage, protecting the romantic narrative that her books depended on. All understandable reasons, but they came at the cost of Royal's story, and Royal could not object. He was already dead when the books were published. He had no advocate, no descendant to say, "Wait, that is not how it happened. Royal mattered. Royal's story deserves telling." His silence was final and permanent. You sit with this knowledge. You understand now that every history book you have read is full of silences like Royal's. Thousands of people erased because they did not fit the narrative, because their stories were too complicated or too depressing or too contradictory to the lesson the author wanted to teach. You understand that Royal Wilder is not special. He is representative. He is every person whose name appears once in a record and then vanishes. Every person whose work sustained a community, but whose story was never deemed worth preserving. Every person who tried and failed and left and was forgotten. The only thing that makes Royal unusual is that he failed so close to someone famous. His brother married a writer. That proximity should have saved him from oblivion, should have ensured that his story survived alongside Almanzo's, but it did not. Because even proximity to fame is not enough if the famous person decides you do not belong in the story. Royal's erasure is complete. His grave has no visitors. His name appears in no textbooks. Children reading the Little House books will never wonder who he was or what happened to him. He is the most thoroughly forgotten person in a famous family's history, and what his silence teaches finally is this. You do not matter unless someone with power decides you matter. Your work does not matter unless someone records it. Your story does not matter unless someone tells it. And if you are unlucky enough to exist in the shadow of someone more famous, more successful, more central to a narrative that needs simplifying, you will be erased. Politely, quietly, completely. Royal Wilder built a store, survived a catastrophic winter, extended credit that destroyed him, worked himself into exhaustion, left Dakota Territory in defeat, wandered for 40 years trying to rebuild something that was already broken, died alone except for a late marriage to a woman whose name is uncertain, was buried in an unmarked grave. And the only reason anyone knows his name at all is because genealogists are thorough and archives are persistent, and gaps in narratives eventually attract curious readers who wonder what lived in the silence. But for most of history, for most readers, for most people who encounter the Wilder family through Laura's books or the television show or the tourist sites in DeSmet, Royal does not exist. He is the brother who was deleted, the merchant who was forgotten, the man who proved that arriving first means nothing if you cannot survive long enough to tell your own story. And the prairie wind blows over the place where his store once stood, carrying away even the memory of his name. You need to see the numbers one more time, not because they will change, but because numbers are the only honest witnesses to what the frontier actually did to people like Royal Wilder. 1879. Royal arrives in Dakota Territory with approximately $800 to $1,000 in capital. This is real money. This is years of savings. This is what separates him from the desperate homesteaders who arrive with nothing but borrowed train fare and hope. He spends $400 building the store, another $300 on initial inventory. The remaining $200 to $300 he keeps as working capital. He extends credit worth $473 during the first year. This is smart business. This is how you build customer loyalty and capture market share. Then the long winter destroys the credit system. He recovers $180. The rest is gone. Not deferred. Gone. 38% recovery rate. He sells the store in 1888 for $320. After paying debts, he has $43 left. Let us do the math that nobody did when they told stories about frontier opportunity. Royal invested 9 years of his life in approximately $1,000 of capital. His return was $43. That is a loss of $957. plus 9 years, plus his health, plus any chance of marriage or family, plus his position in the family hierarchy, plus his dignity. The frontier did not reward his hard work. It extracted value from him, systematically, relentlessly, through weather he could not predict and systems he could not control, and economic forces that operated on scales he could not even perceive. He was not lazy. He was not stupid. He was not unlucky in the sense of making bad choices. He made the same choices any rational businessman would make. He simply made them in a system designed to fail most participants. The Dakota Boom was a mechanism for transferring wealth from settlers to railroads, from farmers to grain buyers, from merchants to suppliers. Royal was a gear in that machine, and the machine ground him down until there was nothing left except a man walking away from a building he once owned with $43 and no future. Now look at Almanzo's numbers. Almanzo also struggles. He loses crops to drought and grasshoppers. He fights the same battles Royal fights. But Almanzo has advantages Royal does not have. He is younger. 10 years younger means 10 more years of working strength. 10 more years before your body starts failing. 10 more years of resilience. He marries. Laura contributes income, teaching, sewing, managing household resources with brutal efficiency. 2 incomes are not twice as good as 1. They are exponentially better because they provide redundancy. He has no business overhead. Farmers have crushing expenses, but they do not have rent, inventory costs, supplier credit terms, and the constant pressure of customers who need goods but cannot pay for them. And most importantly, Almanzo has time. When the Dakota years fail, he is still young enough to move to Missouri and try again, and again, until something works. Royal does not have time. By the time he leaves Dakota, he is 41 years old. The frontier is closed. The boom years are over. All that remains for men his age is wage labour and wandering, and the slow acceptance that the life you planned will never arrive. The math is brutal. 2 brothers, similar starting positions. One survives, one is destroyed. The difference is not virtue, not hard work, not character. The difference is timing, marriage, and luck. America does not like this math. America prefers stories where hard work is rewarded and virtue triumphs. The math says otherwise. The math says that structural forces matter more than individual effort, that systems determine outcomes more than choices, that most people who played by the rules still lost. Royal played by the rules. He lost anyway. And when Laura wrote her books 50 years later, she did not include the math. She could not. Because the math destroys the narrative. The math reveals that the frontier was not a place where good people prospered. It was a meat grinder that destroyed most people who entered it, and the survivors were simply the ones who happened to have the right combination of youth, partnership, timing, and blind luck. Royal had none of those things, so Royal was erased, but the numbers remain. In census records, in homestead files, in business ledgers gathering dust in archives where no one looks. The numbers testify to what actually happened, even when the stories do not. You want to know why Royal matters? Because the numbers say he is the normal case, the expected outcome, the statistical reality that the mythology denies. 80% of frontier businesses failed. Royal was the 80%. Almanzo was the exception, and exceptions get books written about them. Normal cases get forgotten, but normal cases are the truth. And Royal Wilder is the truth that the Little House books could not afford to tell. 1888. Eliza Jane Wilder stands on the platform at the DeSmet train depot and watches her older brother board the eastbound train. She does not cry. Eliza Jane does not cry in public. She is 43 years old, unmarried, a schoolteacher who has fought for every inch of respect she has earned. She knows how to keep her face composed even when her heart is breaking. Royal climbs the steps into the passenger car. He's carrying one bag. Everything he owns in the world fits in one bag. This is what 9 years in Dakota Territory has given him. The ability to relieve quickly because he has nothing worth staying for. He turns at the top of the steps. He looks back at Eliza Jane. She raises one hand, not waving, just acknowledging. He nods, then he disappears into the car. The train pulls away. The locomotive's whistle echoes across the prairie. Eliza Jane stands on the platform long after the train has vanished into the distance. She's thinking about the brother she knew in New York. Strong, confident. The eldest son who was supposed to carry the family name forward. The one who was supposed to succeed. She's thinking about the man who just left. Bent. Exhausted. 41 years old and already old. Defeated by a place that promised opportunity and delivered only subtraction. Eliza Jane knows about subtraction. She has been fighting it her entire adult life. She came to Dakota Territory in 1883. She filed her own homestead claim. A single woman claiming 160 acres of prairie in a world designed for married couples. The land office clerks looked at her with skepticism. Women could claim land, but women who claimed land without husbands were suspect. Unnatural. Probably failures waiting to happen. She proved them wrong. She built her claim shanty. She hired men to break her sod. She taught school to earn income. She managed her claim with the same fierce intelligence she applied to everything. She succeeded where her older brother failed. But success cost her things she will never speak about. Marriage proposals she refused because accepting meant giving up her claim, her independence, her hard-won authority. Social respectability sacrificed because a woman who lived alone and gave orders to men was not respectable by frontier standards. The quiet loneliness of being the only unmarried woman in a community where marriage was the expected destiny. She survived. But survival is not the same as victory. Eliza Jane walks back to her small house in DeSmet. She's thinking about Royal, about what she could have said to him at the depot, about whether anything she might have said would have mattered. She's also thinking about Almanzo and Laura, about the way Laura has never liked her, about the tension that lives between them, unspoken but always present, about the fact that Laura is young and pretty and married to Eliza Jane's younger brother, and that combination gives Laura power that Eliza Jane will never have. Laura will write about these years someday. Eliza Jane does not know this yet, but she senses it. Laura watches everything with careful eyes. She remembers details. She's building a story in her head even as she lives it. And Eliza Jane knows with cold certainty that when Laura tells that story, Eliza Jane will not be the hero. She will be the difficult sister-in-law, the one who tried to control things, the one who had opinions and voiced them and refused to be quietly pleasant. Laura will erase Royal with silence. She will erase Eliza Jane with misrepresentation. Different methods, same result. But tonight, standing in her small house in DeSmet, Eliza Jane is not thinking about Laura's future books. She is thinking about her brother, about whether he will survive wherever he is going, about whether he will find work, find peace, find anything except more failure. She's thinking about the fact that she is the only one who will remember him accurately. Almanzo will remember a simplified version. Laura will barely remember him at all. Rose will never know him. But Eliza Jane knows Royal. She knows his strengths and his weaknesses and the ways the world broke him. And she knows that no one will ask her to tell his story. Because Eliza Jane is not a writer. She's not charming. She's not the kind of woman whose voice gets preserved for future generations. She is the difficult one, the unmarried one, the one who will be remembered, if at all, as a minor character in someone else's narrative. Years from now, when Eliza Jane is old and living in Louisiana, she will read Laura's books. She will see herself portrayed as demanding, critical, unlikable. She will see Royal reduced to a footnote. She will see Almanzo elevated to hero. She will write letters, angry letters, corrective letters, letters saying, "That is not how it happened. You have it wrong." But the books will already be published. The story will already be set. And Eliza Jane's letters will be filed away in archives where they will wait for scholars who will read them decades later and note, in careful academic language, that family members disputed some characterizations. Disputed. as if Eliza Jane's lived experience is merely an alternative opinion, rather than testimony from a witness Laura chose to discredit. But that is the future. Tonight, in 1888, Eliza Jane sits in her house and thinks about her brother boarding a train with one bag. She thinks about the homestead claim he abandoned, the building he sold for a fraction of its value, the dream he walked away from because continuing would have killed him. She thinks about the fact that she is still here, still fighting, still proving that a woman alone can survive what a man with capital could not. And she wonders whether that makes her stronger than Royal, or whether it just means she is more stubborn, more willing to endure, more afraid of what leaving would mean. The prairie wind blows outside her window. The grass whispers secrets that no one will write down. Somewhere east of here, Royal is riding through the darkness toward a future that will give him nothing but 40 more years of wandering and a grave in Louisiana that will lose its marker. And Eliza Jane sits alone, victorious and isolated, wondering whether surviving the frontier is worth the cost if no one remembers you survived. Present day. You stand on Main Street in DeSmet, South Dakota. The town is smaller than you expected. Quieter. The kind of place you drive through on the way to somewhere else unless you're here specifically for the Little House sites. The Ingalls home is preserved. A museum. You can tour it for a small fee, see the rooms where Laura lived, touch the walls her hands touched, feel connected to a story you have loved since childhood. Down the street is the surveyor's house, where the Ingalls family survived the long winter. Another museum, another opportunity to step into the pages of the books and feel the history become real. At the edge of town, markers indicate where Almanzo's claim was located, where he broke sod and built his first house, and courted Laura with buggy rides. The land is private property now, but you can stand on the road and look across the prairie and imagine it. You ask at the visitor centre about Royal Wilder's feed store. The volunteer is friendly but vague. Oh, I think that was somewhere on Main Street, but I am not sure exactly where. There is no marker. No marker. Royal's building is gone. Torn down decades ago to make room for something newer. The exact location is uncertain. The town's historical society has not prioritised researching it. Why would they? Tourists do not come to DeSmet to see where a failed merchant store used to stand. They come to see Laura's story, Almanzo's story, the love story, the survival story, the American mythology story. Royal's story is not what they came for. You walk down Main Street anyway. You look at the buildings. You try to imagine where the feed store might have been. Near the depot, that is what the records say. But the depot has been rebuilt. The street has been repaved. The entire town has been layered over with a century of change. Whatever physical evidence of Royal's presence once existed is gone now, buried, paved, erased. But standing here, you understand something important. Royal is not gone, not completely. He is in the gaps, in the questions the books do not answer, in the census records that contradict the tombstones, in the silences that historians eventually notice and wonder about. He is in every reader who finishes the long winter and asks, wait, what happened to the merchant whose store ran out of supplies? He is in every researcher who compares the books to the documents and finds discrepancies. He is in every person who wonders why the older brother vanished from a story he should have been central to. Royal exists in the negative space, in the outline created by his absence. You cannot see him directly, but you can see the shape of him, the royal-sized hole in the narrative, and that hole teaches something the books could not teach. That history is always incomplete, always simplified, always shaped by the needs and biases of the teller. That the stories we inherit are not truth. They are selections, choices, editorial decisions made by people with their own agendas and limitations. Laura chose to minimize Royal. She had reasons. Protecting Almanzo, protecting the romantic narrative, protecting the myth of frontier opportunity, all understandable reasons. But they came at the cost of historical accuracy, at the cost of Royal's humanity. And that cost matters, because Royal was not a footnote. He was a man, he worked, he struggled, He failed, he suffered, he disappeared. And the fact that his suffering was inconvenient to the story Laura wanted to tell does not make his suffering less real. You stand on Main Street in DeSmet and think about all the royal Wilders, all the people who arrived first and lost anyway, all the merchants whose stores failed, all the farmers whose crops died, all the families who left broke and ashamed, all the men and women who tried and failed and wandered and died without anyone remembering their names. They are the majority, the statistical norm, the truth that the mythology denies. The Little House books are beautiful, they are moving, they have brought joy to millions of readers and comfort to generations of children, but they are not history, they are literature. And literature simplifies, literature shapes, literature serves a purpose beyond documentation. The purpose Laura's books serve is American mythology. The idea that hard work is rewarded, that virtue triumphs, that the frontier was hard but fair, that good people prosper. Royal story serves a different purpose, the purpose of truth, the truth that most people fail, that systems matter more than individuals, that structural forces crush most participants regardless of their virtue or effort. That arriving first guarantees nothing. Both purposes have value, both deserve telling, but only one has been told for the last 90 years. You leave DeSmet with royal story in your mind. It is not a satisfying story. It has no redemption arc, no triumph, no lesson except that life is often brutally unfair and history is written by the people who survive and marry writers. But unsatisfying does not mean unimportant. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones that refuse to comfort, that insist on complication, that honour the forgotten by refusing to let their absence go unnoticed. Royal Gould Wilder was here. He mattered. He tried. He failed. He left. He died. And for 90 years the story most people knew about the Wilder family did not include him except as a shadow. This is his story, incomplete, reconstructed from fragments, but told. Finally, the brother who arrived first, the merchant who lost everything, the man who was deleted from the books but not from the truth. And if you wondered why no one told this story before, the answer is simple, because it is not the story America wants to hear, because it complicates the mythology, because it insists that failure is normal and success is exceptional, and most people who work hard still lose. But Royal Wilder's story is not the only uncomfortable story erased from the Little House mythology. There is another, a woman who homesteaded alone, who filed her own claim, who taught school and managed land and refused to be quietly pleasant. A woman Laura Ingalls Wilder did not like, and portrayed harshly in the books. Her name was Eliza Jane Wilder, royal sister, Almanzo's sister, the independent woman who survived what her older brother could not, the teacher who challenged Laura, the homesteader who proved that women did not need husbands to claim the frontier. And if you think Royal's erasure was thorough, wait until you see what Laura did to Eliza Jane, because deleting a man who left is one thing. But destroying the reputation of a woman who stayed, who succeeded, who refused to be controlled, that requires a different kind of narrative violence. Eliza Jane's story is next, and it will show you that sometimes the cruelest erasure is not silence. Sometimes it is speech, words chosen carefully to diminish, to mock, to ensure that even when you are remembered wrong. Royal was forgotten. Eliza Jane was rewritten. Both disappeared. But only one fought back, and that fight, buried in letters and legal documents and the testimony of people who actually knew her, reveals the final truth about the Little House books, that they were not just simplifications, they were weapons, aimed at anyone who threatened the story Laura wanted to tell about herself, her husband, and her perfect pioneer family. Eliza Jane Wilder threatened that story simply by existing, by being difficult, by being right when Laura wanted to be right, by being a woman who succeeded without a man in a narrative that needed women to be helpless or pleasant or invisible. So Laura destroyed her, on the page, in the books that millions of children would read. Eliza Jane became the villain of a little town on the prairie and these happy golden years, the mean teacher, the jealous sister, the woman you're supposed to dislike. But the documents tell a different story, and that story begins in 1879, when a 44-year-old woman stepped off a train in DeSmet, looked at the empty prairie, and decided she would claim it without asking any man's permission. Her brother Royal had just arrived with capital and plans. Her brother Almanzo would arrive soon with youth and strength, but Eliza Jane arrived with something neither brother had: the absolute certainty that she would survive because she had no choice. Because unmarried women in 1879 either fought or disappeared, Eliza Jane chose to fight, and the fight cost her everything except her land and her pride. And when Laura wrote the books, Eliza Jane lost those too. Next time, you will meet the woman Laura hated, the woman who homesteaded alone, the woman whose real story is so different from the books that reading the truth feels like discovering a different person entirely. Eliza Jane Wilder. The teacher, the homesteader, the difficult woman, the survivor. Her story has been waiting 90 years to be told correctly. And unlike Royal, who left no voice, Eliza Jane left letters. Documents, testimony, evidence that she was not the monster Laura depicted. The Prairie kept Royal's silence, but the Prairie could not silence Eliza Jane. She was too stubborn, too determined, too dangerous to the mythology to be erased quietly. So she was erased loudly, publicly, in books that poisoned her memory for generations. And now, finally, it is time to hear what she would have said. If anyone had listened, if anyone had cared, if anyone had valued truth more than mythology. The wind blows across the prairie, the grass whispers, and somewhere in the silence, Royal and Eliza Jane wait for history to finally notice what Laura left out. Their stories are the truth the Prairie kept, until now, till